All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here. I know, just to let everybody know, we did get an email just this morning from the Army Corps of Engineers saying they're all going to be a half hour late. They have a all hands on deck meeting apparently this morning, but the Army Corps folks will be here about a half hour late, Sage and a few other people. And I wanted to start out really by thanking Danica and Valerie from DNRC for being here. They are not the Yellowstone water planners, but as I think probably you all know, Sarah Molloy has left DNRC, and so they are both filling in, and I'm really grateful to them doing that on top of all their other duties. And thanks to everybody else for making the time. Just as a refresher for everybody, this is the third time we've met. I know there are a couple people I think who haven't been here before. Some of you have been here since the beginning. But really the goal of these conversations that we've been having twice a year now is to provide a space for conservation organizations and others involved in flood recovery in Carbon Park and Stillwater counties to share with one another their flood recovery and response experiences so far, including lessons learned that might be valuable to others, to express their needs for medium and long-term flood recovery assistance to a listening audience of agencies and funders, to improve communications among community leaders, funders, and agencies as we all move forward. And I did forget I didn't introduce myself. So I am Terry Nichols. I'm with the Montana Watershed Coordination Council. Valerie, do you want to introduce yourself as the co-facilitator here?
Sure, I'm Valerie Kurth. I am a regional water planner, just like Sarah was, and I usually focus on the Clark Fork and Kootenai River basins.
Yeah, thanks for stepping in, Valerie. And Danica?
Yeah, I'm Danica Holmes. I just joined the planning team from the Water Rights Bureau at DNRC at the end of April. So I'm the water planner in the Upper Missouri Basin.
Yeah, and thanks to Danica will also be taking our official notes, which we will get out to everybody by the end of the week, along with any additional resources that come up. Oh, Sage is here early from the Army Corps. And so now I'd just like to ask everybody else to just state really briefly, this is not the updates yet. Just state your name, what organization you're representing, and if you're in one of the particular counties or communities, which community or county you're representing. So I will start with Greg because he's first on my screen and he may have someone with him.
Yes, I'm Greg Coleman with Park County Emergency Management.
And I am Lawson Mormon. I'm the floodplain administrator for Park County.
Great. Thanks for both being here. Jake.
Hi, Jake Mormon, DNRC Water Science Bureau Chief.
Okay, Nadine.
I'm Nadine Wansworth, and I'm one of the floodplain outreach coordinators for the floodplain mapping program.
Great. And Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben Bailey. Camera's still not working. I'm with work with fisheries with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks in kind of the mid-Yellowstone area.
Hey, Wendy Weaver, you're up next.
I'm Wendy Weaver. I'm the executive director of Montana Freshwater Partners, and we're based in Livingston.
And sorry, I don't know this person's full name. S. Ray. I'm trying to figure out who that is.
Stephanie Ray. Good morning. Stephanie Ray, Stillwater County.
David Stamey with Stillwater County.
Great. Charlie Gorman.
Hi, I'm Charlie Gorman, State Emergency Management Coordinator for the SECC.
And Shayla, if I've forgotten how to pronounce your name, please correct me. Shayla Wingard.
Shylea, but anything's close. And I work with Tracy Sears over at DNRC Floodplain.
Thank you. Brian Giordano.
Hi, I'm Brian Giordano. I'm a fisheries biologist in Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks in that mid-Yellowstone area.
Hannah Schultz.
Good morning, Hannah Schultz, DNRC Floodplain Outreach.
Thanks for being here. Tracy Sears.
Good morning, Tracy Sears with DNRC. I'm the National Flood Insurance Program Coordinator for the state of Montana.
Lindsay Clark.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Clark. I'm coordinator for the Stillwater Valley Watershed Council based out of southern Stillwater County.
And Douglas Brugger.
We dropped the umlaut apparently. I'm I'm a engineer with floodplain at DNRC with that group.
Okay. Charlie Gorman.
Hi, still Charlie Gorman, Montana DES SECC coordinator.
Okay. Jeff Greenwald.
Morning, I'm Jeff Greenwald. I'm a water resource planner and a project manager with the Omaha District Corps of Engineers, and I'm also the co-lead for the Silver Jackets program for the state of Montana.
Great. Yeah, I think we specifically requested that you be here among several other people. Thanks. Let's see who's next. I think Shannon Blackburn.
Hi, I'm Shannon with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. I'm the fisheries manager for South Central Montana, and that includes the mid-Yellowstone area.
Okay. Mike Ruggles.
Morning, I'm Mike Ruggles. I'm with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. I'm the regional supervisor in the Billings office.
Anthony Joyce.
Good morning, I'm Anthony Joyce. I work with Tracy Sears in the floodplain program as well.
Okay, Leah Schwartz.
Hi, my name is Leah. I'm a project manager with Montana Freshwater Partners. I work with Wendy, and we are based in Park County.
And I'm getting to them again. If I mispronounce anyone's name, please correct me. Keenan Storer.
Yeah, Keenan Storer. I'm with Montana DEQ. I'm the 318 authorization and 401 certification coordinator.
Great. Sharon Flametis.
Sharon Flametis, Stillwater and Carbon Conservation District Administrator and EWP Program Manager.
Jaren Borrego.
Hello, I'm Jaren Borrego with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Sage Joyce is my supervisor, and I do Section 404 and Section 10 permitting, mostly for Stillwater County as it relates to the flood, but I've helped in Park and Carbon County.
Great. And Sage Joyce.
Morning. Good morning, Sage Joyce, Army Corps of Engineers, and I'm the State Program Manager for Montana. Thank you.
Yeah, glad you both made it. Now you know you had a meeting. Peter Brown.
Good morning, everyone. Peter Brown with the Arthur M. Blank Family Foundation and the Amby West Ranches in the Paradise Valley, Park County.
Laurel Hamilton.
Hey, good morning. Laurel Hamilton. I am chief of our flood risk and floodplain management section at the Corps of Engineers in Omaha. I'm also Silver Jacket coordinator for the state of Montana.
Okay. Did I miss anyone? Is there anyone out there who hasn't introduced themselves? Okay, sounds like we've got everybody. Just because I'm just going to read these one more time because we had some new people join us since I gave the spiel at the beginning, just as a reminder to everybody, because I know some folks we very much, you've been coming to these, and some we've asked to come for specific presentations and reasons and information that we all need. The goals of this conversation, or really the main goal of this conversation, and all of these for the last year and a half now, has really been to provide a space for conservation organizations and others involved in flood recovery in Carbon, Park, and Stillwater counties to share with one another their flood recovery and response experiences so far, including lessons learned that might be valuable to others, to express their needs for medium and long-term flood recovery assistance to a listening audience of agencies and funders, and to improve communications among community leaders, funders, and agencies moving forward. So now Valerie has already put these questions in the chat. We're going to start with the county updates, which I put this out. Hopefully each county has chosen a couple of representatives. If not, you can do it here on the fly too. We're asking for 10 minutes from each county, or a little less if you can manage it, depending what you've got, to answer those questions that Valerie did just put in the chat about what lessons you've learned since the last time we met, especially with an eye toward what might be valuable for others in the room to learn about. what do you need from agencies, funders, MWCC, and others who might help going forward? And especially, how have those needs changed since the last time we met, right? 6 months ago in April. And then just as a reminder from our April meeting, there were questions around data sources that people have found useful, identifying and implementing projects, what progress have you made and what resources have you found useful, and also the status of outstanding needs, because each county did share some things in April that were specific to them, and what of those needs have been addressed and which haven't. So that's a lot. That's actually a lot to address in 10 minutes. But I think we've just been going alphabetically. So maybe we can start with Carbon County, whoever the designated people are from Carbon County. I know I saw Ben. I'm trying. Who are our Carbon? Ben, Brian. Funny, I've lost track of who all is on here. Who all is on here from Carbon County?
So this is
I'm
Barry. Oh,
this is Ben. I'm in Carbon County, but I'm with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. I don't know if I could really speak for Carbon County.
Yeah. Didn't we have somebody from the CD on?
yes, I'm from the
thank you.
CD, but I didn't know if the county was handling the talk, the update, or anything. If Paige or Courtney was involved in this, or what?
Paige, I think,
So
yes. Yeah, I was also
So, I
wondering
mean,
about, yeah.
I can give an update on the conservation district side of things.
Okay. Yeah, I think I was hoping somebody from the Clark's Fork of the Yellowstone or some of those groups would be on here too. But yeah, I mean, give us what you've got, Sharon, if you can.
So as for the district, we've had for just this year, we've had up to 50 permits for 2023, 12 emergencies and 10 violations. I know we have quite a few active more violations, so I know that number by next week will be up higher once it goes through the board meeting and it gets recorded as a violation. We've been doing the EWP program. We will have to ask for an extension. Both the Stillwater Carbon EWP program has been going. We're hoping to not have to ask for an extension for Stillwater. But because we have two big projects, one at East Rosebud Lake and the town of Fromberg, that's still in engineering. We will need to ask for an extension for EWP funds. Yeah, so we have, what is it? We have, let's go. Okay, so we have for carbon, we have 21 projects in Carbon County. Some of those have been merged together. So at the beginning of it, we had 50 between the two counties, but now the split up is where we had to combine projects is 21 for carbon. And so the amount we have for the carbon is $3.2 million. We've only into that about a quarter of the way. So a lot of it's still in engineering. So hopefully we'll be getting them out and getting permits once everything has been approved through the EWP standards. So
okay. Yeah, and I thought somebody from yeah, thank you for those updates, Sharon. I I thought somebody from Clark's Fork Yellowstone was going to be here because they had, anyway, the last time we met back in April, they were looking for assistance from funding agencies for grant administration support, which might speak to some of what you're at. They, had a couple grants awarded, but the community is needing more assistance with getting money to where it needs to go, finding sponsors, signing contracts, ensuring proper procedures. How has that all been going? Is that still a need? How is?
As for us, I mean, we have, our workload is pretty full. Between the two counties, we have 3 employees, which we're only supposed to have 1.5. So we are at our max of what we can do. With the Stillwater EWP program slowing down, and we're getting to the tail end of that one, and we have quite a few of the projects completed, we would be able to start writing more grants when they come available. I know the cycle's just opened up here soon, or it's opening soon. So it's really trying to figure out the need, what the people are needing in order to see what we can find in grants. So.
Got it. And any lessons that you've learned that might be valuable for others on the call, for other counties dealing with these same issues?
Well, anytime we're writing grants, I mean, we have to have an engineer, and engineers are hard to find right now because they are extremely busy. So them, I think some of those engineers don't get paid as much as, at the beginning of trying to help write a grant, with explaining what it is that's needed in order to even write the grant, to see if we can even get funding. So, and I think a lot of the engineers right now are tied up on big projects that they don't have time to see if there's money available. So I know that is a struggle with us, with just trying to find EWP engineers. I finally just got the last project engineered, the commitment from the engineer. So it's been a long process to get all of these projects engineered.
Yeah. And
so it's not just about trying to find someone to help run the grant, but it's also finding the support that admin needs in order to do it.
Yeah.
And then we won't even talk about contractors.
Yeah.
Because they're booking out to next year already. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else worth sharing with the group, or?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks for those updates. We'll go to Park County now.
Hi, so we just completed our crisis counseling program that provided social support contacts with the public. It was primarily active listening and connecting people with available resources. And while the program was delayed and new to Montana, it was extremely effective and appreciated in Park County. Our team of 3 crisis counselors knocked on 217 doors, both homes and businesses, and had 258 unique confidential conversations from Cook City to Livingston. We intend to request this type of intervention as a first step towards recovery for all future disasters. The debris removal project was completed in August. We had 2 private property owners take advantage of the program. The conditions of the permit to work within the river did not meet a cost-benefit analysis, and those sites were removed from consideration. The Upper Yellowstone River Assessment Committee has put together lessons learned and recommendations for future efforts to include in an after-action review process on the debris removal. One item I'm still working on is what appears to be a trailer in the river with a tongue sticking out, presenting a hazard. I have a request into MTDES on how to best proceed with this. If anybody on this call has any ideas, let me know. We're about to begin studies to understand how the river and our flood risks have changed. With the support of the Montana DNRC, the county secured a grant for a channel migration zone mapping project on the Yellowstone from Gardner through Livingston. The Army Corps of Engineers will be conducting complementary CMZ studies on the Shields River and in the Cook City Silvergate area. And the Army Corps will also be studying the Livingston levee. They'll look at several levee failure scenarios to develop inundation and timing data, so we better understand our flood risk in Livingston. I was recently contacted by Kathy Garcia from St. Vincent de Paul Disaster Services. They appear to be working with FEMA to bring case management services for the 2022 flood disaster back to Livingston. I'm assuming the other counties as well. They're trying to hire a local administrator, which has been difficult. So I still get a few requests for assistance, and I'm referring them to their main number. And while we're transitioning from recovery to planning and preparedness for our 22 flooding, we're beginning recovery for our 2023 flood disaster. We have our recovery scoping meeting this afternoon for that. That's my update. Lawson?
Yeah, I'll give a very brief, much less detailed update than Greg, and yield most of our time to our county representatives we have on the call. So probably no surprise, our office is handling a unusually large volume of permits. We're more than double what we normally see, and I don't think it has slowed down for now, but I think that's seasonal, and I think we're going to see a pretty large uptick continuing on. I'm also working with Nadine and her team on an update of our official maps. And that's pretty much the update I wanted to give. I do have, I'm curious as to everyone else on the call, because I've experienced some interesting things that we can maybe talk about later. By and large, I think our population is a lot more receptive to our floodplain regulations and the dangers associated with flooding than they have been. However, there is a small minority that's really been galvanized by this event. If they didn't get wet, they essentially think that they're flood proof. And I'm just curious as to how other communities are handling that small but time consuming population. So we can talk about that hopefully later. Thank you.
Yeah, let's talk about it in the discussion, because I'm sure you're not alone in that. Yeah.
I'm sure.
Got it. Yeah. Oh, were you gonna say something else, Greg? Because you do have more time.
Yeah. Wendy Weaver's going to jump in and help fill out our time here too.
Okay, great. And also, I just wanted to, Greg, that comment on the mental health resources. I know that came up right from the beginning, and I was going to just as a reminder, drop in the chat the disaster recovery resources that we put up on the MWCC website that came out of those initial talks in October 2022. So including mental health things. So.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I won't add too much, but I want to emphasize the debris removal that happened in Park County, I think was prescriptive to Carbon and Stillwater, and did not go through the proper permitting channels, nor engaging with the URAC and the folks working on the ground. So I would encourage DNRC and DES to really take close note of what did not go well, to hopefully prevent that from happening in the future. And we put a lot of time into capturing those lessons learned. So hopefully we can avoid that in the future. I guess the other thing that is happening is Park County Environmental Council is working with a consultant to do a pretty comprehensive flood gap analysis for future flood resiliency. So those meetings have ensued, and we're pretty hopeful at a higher level we'll identify what things we could be doing better in the community. And then we're also involved with a grant, an Economic Development Act grant to also support those needs. I think at a high level, we have a lot of needs and a lot of gaps and a lot of things that happened that did not go well. So we're working hard to figure out how to find funding to fill those capacity and those things. So next time, hopefully it's not as disastrous.
Yeah. And Wendy, I know you were going to speak a little bit more, or somebody was going to speak a little bit more to the debris removal in the next section, right? I think.
Yeah. Do you want myself or Ashley to talk about that?
Yeah, I actually, and Tracy just asked a question. Can you expand? But I think we did have, just after these updates, maybe I should have been thinking and put Park County last, but we do have 10 minutes to talk a little bit more about those debris removal efforts. So maybe we can put a pin in that and hear from Stillwater County and then circle back to that.
Perfect.
Does that work, Wendy? Okay.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. If I had been thinking, I would have put Stillwater first and let you just go into that. Yeah. Anything else other than debris removal for now from Park County? Okay. Then we'll move on to Stillwater County. I think I did see Lindsay on here, maybe some other folks, whoever was going to speak for Stillwater County.
I'll start out, then Stephanie and David, you want to take over with your projects if that works? So we spearheaded the river assessment triage team. They did on-site assessments last winter, so in March, and those were completed, and the report is available on our website, www.stillwatervalleywatershed.com. It's about 100 pages. We did the formal presentation with the community in July, and we had about 50 people present on site and 20 some via Zoom. And I think it went really well. We've got some great community feedback. We will meet as a board later this month, along with Tommy Flanagan, our RAT leader, and kind of discuss where we want to go with a phase 2, what projects we want to look into, and then funding. So we are looking for feedback on where to go from here. We've got some more community support financially to move on with a phase 2. So with the momentum we built with this RAT report, we don't want to lose that momentum, but we also want to be patient, knowing that the river is going to continue to change. So we want to kind of keep some things on the back burner as far as how we want to proceed in the future. And also, like I mentioned, our report's available online, and then we want to start the conversation about the CMZ mapping and if that's something that our watershed group wants to take on, or if that's more of a county-driven effort, or if we want to team up on that. So that's another conversation that we'll continue on. So that is my report and updates so far.
Thanks, Lindsay.
You're welcome.
Stephanie and David, we're maybe going to hop on.
You want to? So we've had a lot of, let me get closer. So I think we've had a fair amount of success with the projects. We got the Nye Road fixed, thank goodness, that leads to the Stillwater mine, which was our biggest project, and I think probably the biggest project out of the whole disaster. We've got other big projects with roads that we are working through and are near completion, and then a few things that the state brought in a contractor to do some of the recovery for them. So they're helping us sort of close out, if you will, some of those projects that we've got. And they've also got a mitigation group that is working on, so different set of contractors, but working with mitigation. We're looking at doing a couple different things with that. One is we're looking at a master study and what that would look like, and that would help us better identify where the river was, where it is now, where are our threats and hazards up and down the river, what projects need to be taken on. This was one of the things, probably the first week of the flood, I said, we need to look at the whole river or all of the waterways to better define what we need to do, because if we work here, how is it going to affect somebody upstream or downstream? So I think we need a master study, or maybe everybody needs a master study to get a better handle on that. I think as far as we're still working through, and if, the state project that was debris management, I think for me, lessons learned from that is, up front, I think there needs to be a lot more coordination up front, so we can better have all of the folks that are going to be the partners to work together. So that's DNRC, that's local floodplain, especially for us in all of these counties, that's EHP, all of those things up front. I think if I had to say, if you had to go back to the flood itself, I think we the local jurisdiction and the state needs to come together and better define what disaster mode looks like for us. And that means that all the departments, for example, that would do floodplain permitting come together and be able to work together in a more cohesive fashion and maybe accept surveys or reports. We spent hundreds of hours doing survey work, and we would take different people out to look at the same spot. And so it would be helpful if, for example, DNRC floodplain goes out and looks at something and they capture the same information that somebody else needs. Maybe it would be helpful to say, okay, if floodplain has captured that, we should be able to use this for our permitting and streamline the permitting process. The other thing I would say is I would like to see, and again, I've sort of asked for this, I think the first week after the flood, is we need to design a playbook for what a flooding event looks like. And that sort of would help us maybe better align what our response would be, what the mitigation, what recovery looks like, those kind of things, to be able to pull people together and make a task force, if you will, to help with the recovery piece and the permitting processes and those kind of things. And I think the last thing that we're probably working on is, we still got a lot of debris in the water, so we still have some issues, I think, that are going to come up with that, because we didn't get, I think, maybe 10% of the debris out of the water. We're looking with the mitigation folks that are the contractors near Nye Road, near the mine site, about some rock and gravel that have some potential impacts on our roads, and that project that was just complete. So we're still working on that to try to get that as like a 406 project, hopefully. And then Stephanie can give you information about floodplain for local for us.
Yeah, I guess just kind of bringing the team up to speed on where we're at from the floodplain permitting side of things. Having over 160 applications come in a couple of weeks span was huge for us. So we've been really working our way through that. We didn't have a CFM on staff at the time, so we had to contract that. I think we're about halfway through that permitting process, but one of the lessons learned from my perspective in administering the floodplain program and needing trained staff on site is just that, expanding our training options, our training ability, making sure that, that communication is happening between the state agencies. And what would have really been helpful for me is that relationship building part of it ahead of time. Like, I would have loved to have known, Sharon better, that established relationship through the conservation district. I did know my DNRC team fairly well. They are really good at doing outreach, but Army Corps, I would have loved to have, been able to meet with Army Corps folks. So all the people involved, Brian and, Shannon, all the people involved in the permitting process, have those relationships established ahead of time, instead of having to build them under an extremely stressful event. But again, just needing that expanded training, and it's not easy to get your CFM. So not that it needs to be easy, but does it need to be this hard? I guess would be a question. But anyway, thanks, Tracy.
Yeah, thanks for that, Stephanie. I think a lot of people were nodding their heads, even people not showing their videos. Yeah, thank you both, all three of you from Stillwater County, for sharing all those things. And I was just about to drop. I know David just mentioned yeah, we need to have a playbook, right? And I think that's been coming up. And like right now, I know you're all still in the thick of projects and stuff, but the more time goes on, the more that that seems to be yeah, something that could be a priority. And just for those of you who maybe haven't been to the other meetings or haven't looked at, but somebody, I don't remember who, at the very first meeting shared Colorado had this sort of lessons learned disaster recovery document that I just put in the chat that could be helpful for creating something for Montana too. Yeah, thank you all for sharing those things. And I think that, and yeah, lots of things. I hope everyone's agency people and folks who aren't getting a chance to talk at the beginning here, keeping some notes, because I feel like there's a lot of things to talk about in our discussion a little bit later on. But for now, just we'll go back to Park County, because I know that some folks from Park County wanted to talk just a little bit more in depth about the debris removal. And things that maybe didn't go as well as they could have, some lessons that they've learned in that process. I don't know if that was Wendy or Greg, or I'm not sure who was going to speak to that.
Yeah, I guess what I can say is that, I think the prescription to remove debris in Park County was much different than what was necessary in Carbon and Stillwater. And I'm just speaking to a meeting we had with DES after this did not go so well. So I think a lot of the debris that we had, we didn't agree that it was necessary to protect infrastructure or public health safety issue, but was actually super critical for river ecology and the benefits that large wood in the system brings. And so the state didn't have any of the permits. They hadn't spoke to Fish, Wildlife and Parks. They had, I guess, not gone through the proper channels and permitting to get feedback from the Upper Yellowstone River Assessment Committee, which was our committee we formed after the river happened. So it consumed a huge amount of all of our time and energy just trying to respond and figure out what the hell was going on. Why was this happening in this way? And ultimately detrimental to the river in these areas that the debris was removed. A lot of it was natural and not actual man-made debris from the floods. So anyway, I think looking back, we have a better understanding of how we would want or not want this to go, and how scouring floodplains to remove this material is detrimental to the river and actually is counterproductive, when many times this debris provides friction, it slows down the floodwaters, it helps with erosion and all these things. And then when we go in and scour it, it actually will exacerbate attenuation of future floods. And so it's, in many cases, what we saw was very counterproductive, which ties into a lot of the education and outreach we recognize is really important for our community, and that we need to do a better job of talking about why messy floodplains are important and how that connects with future floods. So we have an idea just how much more education and outreach we need to do, and that ties into the channel migration zone mapping effort that we're going to be doing with the county. And so it's all very connected and tied. And we went back through the recommendations following the 96 and 97 floods when the governor's task force led that effort. And the mentality back then is we needed to remove all this large wood, and then years later they kind of went back on that, realizing no, we shouldn't be doing that in with exception to cases where that truly is compromising bridges or infrastructure. So with that, I don't know, Tracy, you asked a question. I'm not sure if you can explain more what you're asking. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, Wendy, sorry. I know you had mentioned something about DNRC and permitting, and so I guess I was kind of confused on what department with DNRC you were talking about with permitting.
With respect to the debris removal or just the overall?
With respect to debris removal.
We had been told that DNRC typically leads these types of efforts, and for whatever reason was not involved with this. And so that's when DES stepped in, and then we're ill-equipped to be connected with the right folks within the community. So I don't know all the background. We only know what happened, what played out on the ground here. So I guess to that point is, how can we coordinate better? I mean, we keep hearing this over and over and over. How can we coordinate agency response, whether it's permitting, capacity to address the issues, the gaps that we have in place, in a better job next time? So I don't know if that answers your question, but maybe it's redundant. I think we're just all asking for better coordination.
No, I really appreciate that, Wendy. I think when it comes to that debris removal, I would really switch us over to Greg, because I know that was an area that was identified through emergency management. And that's why DES was actually addressing that issue, because there was some concern with the amount of debris that was in the streams that were creating situations where there was a concern about infrastructure. But those are all kind of led at the community level, and it starts with your emergency manager. But I know Greg is on; he could probably answer on that debris removal. You had mentioned DNRC, so we were just a little confused on if it was navigable waterways or if it was an overall looking at some of the stream projects. So I was just trying to get some clarification on that, Wendy.
Well, I'd like to jump in on this one. FWP's been pretty involved in some of this debris removal, especially in Carbon and Stillwater counties, and how kind of some of this went a little different. But what one thing I noticed, I totally agree with David's idea of a playbook. We need that because a lot of stuff went around permitting agencies, and sometimes FWP administers the 124 permit, and sometimes we were kind of the last to know that things were actually happening. So I think it gets to the coordination, it gets to the communication aspects of it. But sometimes where it boils down to is some of us just had one struggle we had was determining what the definition of debris even is. Some folks looked at it as woody debris. Some folks looked at it as house material or building material, and sometimes it was a combination of all of it. And one thing we kind of all need to know and realize is that we're all looking at different things when we're looking through these permitting. FWP is in charge of the 124 process, which looks at stream function and protecting stream function within the river. Now that includes fish habitat, but it also includes stuff that Wendy was talking about, which stabilizes banks, which prevents potential increased erosion. So I understand the streamlining portion of it, and trying to make things easier to go through and get major projects done. But at the same time, there are folks that are trained in these kind of things and know how these systems should work. And you can't really have somebody that knows everything. Like, I'm not an engineer, but I can tell you that woody debris plays a really important role in stream function. So you kind of have to have those players at the table. And frankly, for when it started, we weren't at the table for a lot of it. And that's an issue. And that's an issue with other folks that should have been at the table for it. And that's where that playbook that David was talking about really should come into play. Like, okay, what do we do? Step 1, step 2, step 3, after we make sure everybody's safe. But one thing we ran into another thing we ran into is really the importance of understanding what the permits say and what you're actually applying for. Because we had folks go outside of what the permit was actually for and what they were applying for. When we're analyzing a permit, we're looking at the application that's given to us, and we look at it and say, yeah, that makes sense. We understand it, but that doesn't give free rein to go in and do other things. So I think you really need to I think what would really be helpful is if we understood what you're applying for, talk about the project, and some of these issues may not have come up.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in to provide my 2 cents on it. I absolutely agree. I think we need to start with a better understanding, a shared understanding of what hazard debris is, and I think that varies per waterway. So it's not, you can't identify, it's not a certain kind of debris, it's what's in your waterway and what infrastructure it might be threatening. And really, this, I believe, was the first time I've experienced FEMA's debris removal capability, and that's why it was with DES, is it's a FEMA capability that was eligible, based on the disaster. The problem is I think, from my perspective, I think it's the wrong tool for at least the Yellowstone River. The contractors that I was talking with, they are very skilled at cleaning up after hurricanes and major disasters in urban areas, and it's just a different landscape. And I think what we really need, and still need, really, is instead of mobilizing heavy equipment across the waterway onto the islands, that we need something more mobile and to be able to cherry pick the C&D debris and things like that while leaving the other woody debris in place. And the FEMA tool is not appropriate because you can't bring contractors from Louisiana and ask them just to pick C&D off the river. I mean, it's not economically viable. So figuring out how we can create an effective debris removal program for our stretch of the river is top of my mind.
Greg, I couldn't agree more with what you just said. It totally was, I think, a big part of the crux of this, of what came down in some of these issues, is it just was not the right tool. When talking to FEMA and through some of these, we would show pictures of these clean waterways that DES came and did remove in certain situations, and they said, yeah, that seems good. And we're like, no, this is not how Montana riverways work, right? This is not how we look at roughness in our rivers, and that provides stream function, and it helps landowners in the long run. So if we would have a better tool, I totally agree with removing all the C&D that we can to get out of there. But that stuff does not need to be in our rivers. But as far as woody debris and stuff, there's a reason for some of it there. And yeah, there are some times that it is not what we want in an area, because it can provide some issues for infrastructure, but not all of it is bad. And we certainly hit on with that tool was remove everything. And that was the way, that was the way it was set up, right? It's not economically viable to just pick and choose. And that would be awesome if we could have a better tool in our playbook that gets to what we actually need.
Yeah. So
Thank you. Oh, I was just,
our
go ahead, David. Go ahead.
Sorry to what those two said. So I think part of that, so that the state DES debris removal. So I think part of that is, I'm not sure how effective overall FEMA is for understanding the landscape of where we are, Montana. There was a lot of, we went through a lot of, it seems like, training and education to them just to tell them where they were and explain sort of the landscape. So I think the response model, if you want to call it that FEMA uses for many of the western states like Montana, the Dakotas, Wyoming, is not very effective a lot of times. And so I would encourage the state DES office to have conversations with FEMA, the Region 8 office down in Denver, to see if we can't better define the needs of Montana, the needs for flooding, and what that response looks like, and a more surgical approach to doing things, rather than the cookbook sort of response that I think we got. I think that would be helpful. I think the other thing that was super helpful for us, for example, in the train derailment, is the feds, the EPA sent up folks that were subject matter experts that could help us immediately make decisions. And they had the authority to do things, and FEMA didn't come with that. It was sort of convoluted in how FEMA worked for a fair amount of the time, I think, when they initially responded, and who could answer questions and those kind of things. But I think some subject matter experts to come up and give good advice and help pull everything together initially would be very helpful.
Yeah, great. Glad you jumped in, David. I just wanted to point out that Wendy, I think somebody from the Upper Yellowstone had mentioned a lessons learned document from the debris removal effort, and then Peter dropped the story map that the Upper Yellowstone River Advisory Committee had created. Hopefully everybody saw that in the chat. Is that the same as the lessons learned document, or is there something in addition to that story map?
No, the story map is what we created, hopefully as a guide, post flood.
Yeah.
And so that was largely ignored, which is why we then created the lessons learned, so we could capture that whole process. And that was a different document that we shared with DES, I believe, DNRC. I don't remember who all received that.
Okay.
Different.
Yeah, I was trying to remember if I've seen that, and I was wondering if that's something that you could share that I could get out to everybody in the follow-up email, that lessons learned document.
Sure, I did email that to you, but I can resend it.
You probably did. I can check back. Sorry about that, but yeah, I'll share that out then.
Barry, I just wanted to make one more point. Talking with my counterpart over in Vermont, I'm not certain, and Charlie and maybe DES and somebody from FEMA can expand on this, but I'm not certain that they're going to be very keen by doing any more debris removal projects such as this. So I think as a state, we need to actually look at funding to be able to do some of this work ourselves, which some of these guidances that are being provided might help. But I know that Vermont tried to get it as well, and they were being denied early on. So it's interesting to see the dynamics, and maybe they understand that, I know when this was kind of going forward, this was something that was fairly new for the region, and something that FEMA didn't often do. So it might be one of those things that we were, as a state, we'll have to look at a little bit deeper if the communities are going to need assistance with kind of helping in these situations, and trying to find additional funding sources for it.
Good to know. Okay. We're about at our break time. I just wanted to check in. Valerie, was there anything in the chat or otherwise? I saw a few comments come up. Anything that we needed to highlight before? And Douglas, I'll get to you in just a second.
I don't think so.
Okay.
There's some good resources.
Yeah. Okay. And Douglas, did you had something you wanted to share real quick?
Sure. Yeah, just one more, similar to Tracy, just kind of adding another point, or I really want to second David's sort of recommendation of the task force as well. That's something, as we've chatted internally, seems like something to set up a framework for before the next flood. I honestly think that that's probably more valuable than one of these playbooks, because you put together this playbook based on 2022, it's already out of date by 2024, but by all the little changes in all the different permitting agencies. So what you need is people like us to get a special sort of appointeeship, some kind of task force that's dedicated to putting time into these things. Just like you said, that example with the train bridge and derailment, where you have a subject matter expert that's there to provide that expertise, that's worth its weight in gold, and because it's very hard for any one person to clear their plate for when the flood comes along. So and I also think, we'll keep looking into it. Probably DES would be the centerpiece for it. And they already have some mechanism in place, is my understanding. But when it comes to things that like the governor's office level support can be provided, I think any governor they're probably saying, what can I do? And when it comes to the way the bureaucracy works at all these state agencies, that's the kind of thing that the governor's office can sort of support this task force. It can be the liaison back and forth for those political conversations. And so, yeah, I think getting that framework set up before the next disaster hits would be a great idea. And so just wanted to second that, David. And, I think amongst this group, let's keep that idea moving and see what we can do to make it happen.
Great, thanks for that. We are at our break time, and we'll just take a quick 3-minute break. Come back at we can say 11:01. Just give people an extra moment. 11:01, we'll come back and we'll hear from Nadine and Hannah about floodplain mapping efforts. So yeah, back here at 11:01. Thanks. Okay, we'll just give everybody a moment to hop back on here. Those of you who might be making a cup of coffee and just waiting to hear people's voices to know if you should hop back on. Okay. I'm gonna hope, yeah, I guess most folks have their cameras turned off, so I'm gonna hope that most of you all are back on. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate that, Greg.
Thought we could help out there.
Thank you. Yes, I don't have to just guess because I'm really thankful that Nadine and Hannah were both able to step on here and talk about the floodplain mapping efforts that are going on. And then also I know that Park County is going to talk a little bit about their CMZ mapping efforts. And so, yeah, I don't want them to be talking to nobody. So Nadine, Hannah, take it away.
Thanks so much, Terry. And I just want to say thanks for letting us come on because we did. Hannah and I kind of got our hands smacked a little bit from one of the communities because they're like, DNRC is doing this and this and this. Like, well, this DNRC is this side, that's not us, and the other side of DNRC. So this is super helpful. So yeah, flood study, all three communities, Park County, Stillwater County, and Carbon County. Actually, for those of you who don't know this, we were supposed to be rolling out new floodplain maps to Carbon County the week after the flooding. So that didn't happen. After the flooding, when we came and sat down with them, they all said, so our maps stink now, can you get us some new floodplain maps? So we at DNRC Floodplain applied for a grant from FEMA to fund the project and what that's gonna get us. So that's kind of what the bottom line of this whole project is. And that this group is probably pretty interested in. So we have applied and received the funding and started work on getting new LiDAR, new bathymetric survey data, structure survey data, updated hydrology, and updated hydraulics. Now, our end goal is to update the regulatory floodplain maps, working with Lawson, Stephanie, Courtney, and Paige. But the other data is pretty useful for some of the other efforts that are already going on. We're still working out the schedule, but I think Doug did give me some time frames for some of this work as I get it bigger. So LiDAR for Carbon and Stillwater and for Park will be publicly available by the end of the summer of 2024. We did some post-flood bathymetric survey for and hydraulic structures for Carbon County. That's ready now. So anybody that's interested in that, that's available. And then hydrology, the USGS has updated their flood frequency analysis already. That's available publicly, but the rest of the hydrology, the countywide, will be available probably around spring of 2024. So our primary points of contact are going to be Lawson, Stephanie, and those floodplain administrators. And we just ask that if you want the data other than internally here at DNRC, to just at least let them know so that way they know where their data is going out so they can kind of keep track of it. So, and I kind of also wanted to, I have 5 minutes left, and I don't know if Jeff has been able to stay on. Another part of us working with the communities is we also help with the Silver Jackets program. So I wanted to give 5 minutes to Jeff for a quick plug if he could.
Hey Nadine, this is Tracy. Unfortunately, Jeff had to jump off.
Okay.
He might try to jump back on, but I do know, so Silver Jackets is kind of a core kind of led coordination project. They have them in each one of the states. Nadine and I sit on as the state representatives for Montana. We work with various agencies to look at certain projects. A lot of projects get picked up under core funding and they can kind of allocate some of their folks to do certain work. So they have a lot of projects that are going on in the areas. And if Jeff or I think Laurel might jump back on, but right now what they have, the new projects are going to be the Yellowstone and tributaries, the channel migration zone maps. And so we're trying to get them to coordinate with existing efforts that are ongoing in certain areas. They're looking at the Fromberg channel migration zone map as well. They're looking at the Livingston levee breach analysis and structure inventory. They have a few other projects that are going on around the state, actually quite a few, but they're also looking for new proposal ideas. There's going to be a Silver Jackets meeting in Red Lodge on October 23rd. We'll get the agenda out. If you're interested in attending, please let us know. One of the things that when we started Silver Jackets way back in 2010 was trying to get agencies to kind of coordinate on all these projects together. We were finding out that multiple agencies were doing LiDAR in certain areas, 3 or 4 different agencies doing it at the same time. We found out even with CMZ mapping, there are a lot of folks that were doing CMZ mapping in the same location. So it's kind of a way to kind of have an idea of around the state what ongoing projects and how we can kind of leverage all those projects to kind of together. So October 23rd will be at the Roosevelt Center. Again, we'll send out an agenda. Just if you want to send Nadine or myself, you know, an email, just say that you're interested in attending. We'll try to have a link for virtual attendance as well. But yeah, there's a lot of work that's going on within the areas that were impacted, and there are we're trying to generate some proposal ideas for this upcoming funding. I will say, if you're getting a project through Silver Jackets, the way they do it is they actually allocate money to the core folks to do these activities. There's been a little confusion before. We you know, USGS is a big partner with Silver Jackets. Kathy Chase has been on since the very beginning with me. And they're actively kind of trying to leverage funding for an ice jam app, and USGS has kind of led the way, but they've worked with the Corps and they've used some of the Silver Jackets funding for it, but it's not funding going directly to USGS, it's funding that goes directly to their core individuals that can do some of this activity and work. So just wanted to throw that out. And I don't know if anybody has been in contact with Jeff or Laurel, if you do have an interest in some of the projects that are ongoing or any proposal, again, if you want to reach out to Nadine and I will get you in contact with them so they can kind of help coordinate on some of these projects. Thanks,
And
Nadine.
then the other thing I was going to add, Hannah Schultz is the other me. So we're equal. And she dropped the project website in the chat for the Upper Yellowstone flood study. I'll post an updated timeline as soon as we get kind of the timeframes when the data will be delivered. But if you have any other questions, just reach out to one of us about the data.
Thanks, Nadine. I know we cut you just a tiny bit short because of the break. Was that everything? Did you get to everything you needed to?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Just wanted to make sure I got some of the big asks. I know everybody's really excited for LiDAR and the bathy and structure survey. So yeah, there we go. That's
Great.
the big stuff.
Yeah, and also Doug, for those who didn't see, Doug dropped some additional information in the chat as well. Yeah, about the LiDAR and other things that are upcoming. So great. And now I think we had somebody from Montana Freshwater Partners. I think Wendy was going to talk more about the CMZ mapping effort, which I am still learning what the difference is between floodplain mapping and CMZ mapping. And so Wendy was going to talk to the specific CMZ mapping effort in Park County for a moment.
Sure. I will just say that thanks to Greg Coleman and the county, we were able to get a grant from DNRC, Reclamation Development Planning Grant, to update the channel migration zone mapping that was completed in 2009 following the 96 and 97 floods. It was somewhat contentious, unfortunately, in the county to move forward, but we were able to get support from the URAC to do that. And I guess we feel that it's a critical piece of information that goes hand in hand with the FEMA flood maps, and it tends to be very confusing to most people. And so I think we have some work to do on how we talk about the FEMA floodplain mapping and then what channel migration zone mapping is. And I guess I'll just describe it as the CMZs and the county got a grant. They're going to be working with Karen Boyd and Tony Thatcher to update those maps, and also in concert with the Corps on the mapping that they're doing as well. But it shows it uses topo data and aerial imagery, and it shows the river's geomorphic characteristics, and essentially shows where the lateral movement of where the river is going to move over time. So it will show, so if we have our FEMA floodplain mapping, many properties might be out of the floodplain, but they may be perched on a very high embankment, like we saw in Gardner, that still is in a high risk of, when the river floods and moves, of some type of damage. So the CMZ mapping is really important, so that when we're working with the city and the county, and there's either infrastructure improvements or future development that's happening, we're going to hopefully use that as a tool to guide where development and infrastructure should and shouldn't go. And so that's, I guess, what once that's done, we'll be working really closely with our local government to make decisions. If there's a new subdivision, for example, or an upgrade to a bridge, or whatever that looks like, that CMZ mapping will be very important tool.
Thank you, Wendy. And I am just gonna, for what it's worth, for other CMZ mapping efforts in the future, I'm just gonna drop in the chat a couple of grants, because that RDG resource development grant that Wendy was referring to is up again. And then there's, I know, Bureau of Reclamation Water Smart has some funding that might be applied to those sorts of efforts too in the future. Okay.
So I was wondering if I could, this is Stephanie with Stillwater, ask just one question related to like the CMZ mapping and some of the mapping that is going on with DNRC as well. You know, what's regulatory? So, you know, what is regulatory versus just recommended, you know, here's information, please be wise when you consider, you know, building here or whatever. But I guess as a floodplain administrator in a local agency, you know, it's regulatory when what happens, you know, and do you have the support in the community to make that regulatory?
Terry, I can answer that if you want.
Great, thanks.
This issue came up with the Big Hole communities when they actually did some channel migration zone mapping. We had worked with them. We actually had brought in an attorney, a well-known attorney who deals with floodplains, among other kind of water issues. He was fantastic. One of the things he said with the CMZ maps is, he says, because the FEMA maps are so specific on how those floodplain maps are so specific on what they're looking at, those are regulatory to your floodplain program, but you cannot add the CMZ maps on top of that. You would have to have that set up as a separate zoning for a community. So that's what he advised, like the Big Hole communities, to look at a separate zoning program where they incorporated the CMZ maps. And that was the advice he gave for a few years to the Big Hole group. And that's why they have a separate kind of special almost zoning around their CMZ maps and what was done. So a community can definitely utilize that. You just have to do that as kind of a zoning component. I hope that helps explain on that regulatory side.
Well, and I'll add, in Park County, that would not go over well at all. So we are not talking about the CMZ mapping being regulatory, purely as guidance for the city and county making decisions. That would go over not well.
Yeah.
Right now.
Okay. thanks everybody for sharing those presentations and sharing all of that information. And I know there are still some outstanding questions folks probably have related to everything that's been talked about so far. But for this next section, I just want to hear from some of the agencies. And I guys know we've heard a little bit from some of the agencies already hopping in. But if you want to address more of these overarching questions around coordination, around the coordination, having a task force, the debris removal, the mapping, any of these things. If you could just jump in and Valerie just put in the chat, these are the questions that we asked the agency and funding partners to respond to specifically. How and why has your agency's response to flood recovery changed, if at all, since the last time we met? And what updates do you have related to the needs that were expressed in April? And I think Valerie's going to share those notes in the chat. I did put those all out in the email for this meeting. But which of those needs have been addressed, which haven't, and why? A lot of those were also around communication and new data resources as well. So there's a lot there. There's a lot there to respond to. And I am going to ask agencies to just keep it to more like 5 minutes per agency or bureau division, depending on how it works out. So to just hop in as you, rather than me calling on people, just to hop in as it makes sense to respond to the needs and the things that have been expressed so far. And then after we hear from all the funders and agency people who feel like they have something to share, then we'll open it up for a little more broader discussion. And maybe some of the folks who, Army Corps, or some of the folks who haven't gotten a chance to speak yet could hop in first. Don't all jump at once.
Okay, can y'all hear me? This is Sage.
Great,
Sorry,
Jay. I was
multiple
about to
mute.
call on you, so thank you. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Too many options to mute and all of them done at the same time. So, no, I think from the beginning we've definitely appreciate and recognize the need for collaboration with our other permitting agencies. That definitely was a rough start right off the bat, like was mentioned earlier. I think it's come a long way. We have done several things to help out for the future. We've got our regional permit is on the ground and been used many, many times since it was finalized. And we've totally, since the flooding of last year, we've reviewed 572 actions for permits. And so that's just a huge amount. That's about a third of our workload for the year, or over this past or since then. over 200 in Carbon, 86 in Park, 188 in Stillwater. That's really big numbers. And we are almost fully staffed again, finally, after about a year and a half of limping along with very minor staffing. And so hopefully that's not going to be an issue in the future. We did ramp up with some extra staffing from other states. That helped out a lot, and that's working to, just training people from Colorado, Nebraska, Alaska, wherever they're from, to how to do Montana. That was kind of the big hurdle, coming from their states, not understanding how we work and how stuff is done up here. Trying to think what other, back to your other questions.
Yeah, and those are in the chat too. That's
yeah. So, yeah, a big problem that we've had too is getting data, just getting access to some of this stuff. And then when we do get access to it, what to do with it and how to use it. We got several terabytes worth of aerial imagery from Maxar and the global or digital Earth folks, and just how to use that and how to get it into each of our project managers' hands has been a little difficult. You know, just getting the information out on what, you know, really, Brian alluded to this before. For some reason, people are still afraid to tell us what they're doing and what they want to do. We can pretty much permit anything. We just got to know what it is. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot now after the fact of on the ground, getting projects being modified to the local agencies, and then we don't quite get the word. And so we're permitting something totally different, and we try to go out and do some compliance checks and find out that it's not what was permitted on our part. Might have been permitted by somebody else because it was a on-site modification. Just those kind of communications are a little tough, and just getting the word out to people that you just got to fill out the application and let us know what it is you want to do. Because we're pretty creative and we have a lot of permitting mechanisms, a lot of them. In the past, like 3 years since I've been in my position, we've denied one permit, and that was just because it wasn't permittable by someone else. So, I mean, we're dealing with, like I said, 1,400, I think, since last June that we've reviewed across the state, and over 500 of them being just due to this flooding event. So, any other questions? That's on to you.
No, thanks, Sage. That's really helpful.
Okay. Excellent.
Other folks, agencies, funders who might want to chime in?
Hi, this is Charlie Gorman from Montana DES. For complete transparency, I got onto this call just for gaining knowledge and information about what's taking place. I work as the supervisor for the State Emergency Coordination Center, and the people that some of the conversation needs to be given to in my agency are away at a conference. So I have taken notes about some comments that were made. Greg Coleman made a comment about some debris of a trailer that's still in the river, and that you were working with someone here at DES. And then Dave comment about having a playbook on response. Very good idea. Wendy's comments about how we can coordinate our agencies better is something that I think that we can work on. And Greg also made a mention about having the wrong tools in the cleanup of the river for debris management. So these things I will pass on to Jake Gonu and Sarah and Allison, who are in our office and does response and recovery mitigation, and hopefully get you some answers through them. Sorry, I wasn't able to contribute anything to this.
No, thanks for being here, Charlie. We appreciate you passing that information along to people who need to hear it. Anyone else? I do want to make sure that all of our agency partners and funders have a chance to speak as well. So I'll give us another minute, and then if we don't hear from anybody else, we can just open it up to general discussion, because I know there are a few questions posed and things that everybody might want to jump in on, but let's just wait another minute to see if any other agency folks step in.
I guess I'll step in real quick. I don't think there's much more from FWP's perspective than I haven't already said, but I think one thing we need to realize with these floods is they are kind of natural processes, and understanding what they do and the outcomes from them, it can be beneficial to the system. And we're not just talking fish habitat, but I watched a lot of riprap banks go in and pulling out woody debris, which serves the purpose of riprap banks, and I think, or can serve the purpose of riprap banks. And I think having some more education along that. I think, you know, we're working with Stillwater for the rat team was awesome, and getting some of that across. You know, it'd be awesome to have community members follow some of those guidelines. And we need, as you go further east from Park County, there's not the open-mindedness of using woody debris or letting the river do what it needs to do. There's certainly more of a mentality of hard rock is the only answer. And engineers feel that. It seems, you know, engineers go that route too. And, you know, one thing I would really like to encourage folks in communities and groups that have connections within the communities is kind of reach out to them and let them know that we're here to try to help and give some recommendations. We can't design a project for you, but there's a lot of information out there. And on DNRC's webpage, there's a stream permitting book that's 200 pages long with 100 pages of examples or whatever it is. I mean, you know, there's a lot of options out there, and they can be a lot cheaper too. So I heard Mark talk about a cost benefit analysis. I mean, that's great. People should be looking at that kind of stuff. I understand you can't go to that degree, but there's a lot of resources out there for folks if they know that it's there. But you know, a lot of times when we see projects, whether it's a 124 or a 310, it's already engineered. The people have already spent money on it, and it's hard to change something. And I shouldn't say change something, but provide recommendations that would be better for the stream and probably better for the landowner. So maybe take a step back occasionally, you know, protect our infrastructure right away after these, you know, big events, but take a step back. And if we can encourage people to take a step back and look at it as a holistic approach a little bit more than just rushing right in and fixing something when it might not need to be is important. I mean, Dave mentioned looking at a study and looking at impacts up and down the stream of your landowners and or your neighbors, and that's huge, right? And that's part of why we do these site visits. So I think if we can encourage folks to take a step back to consider some other options, it could go a long way with river health, with neighbor help, and really help within their land, and just again encouraging, you know, we can say it till we're blue in the face of interaction between agencies, but nonprofits as well. They really, that's where the groundwork's done, is with the nonprofit stuff and within the community base. So if we can get folks to continue to educate people and to give new options that way, I think that's really where we make some head ground. That didn't make sense.
Yeah, thanks. And Brian, that speaks to, gosh, I'm gonna forget who brought that up very at the beginning, like how do we work with people who are not on board with the vocal minority, I think was the question. I think this feeds into a lot of that, right?
So this is Laurel Hamilton. I think this is kind of a good segue into some of the core programs that we have. I apologize. I know I was on earlier and had to jump off, and Jeff Greenwald was on. I don't know if he talked at all. And then Tracy did a good job describing Silver Jacket stuff. But I just wanted to put my 2 cents in since I'm on the meeting. But the Corps has a lot of programs that we can do, you know, aside from what Sage is doing in regulatory and her team. So, you know, here in Omaha, we've got the ability to assist with flood response. And we did in the 2022 flood. We had some teams go out there, collect surveys, do some technical assistance. And we have the Silver Jacket program that Tracy touched on. In that, the Corps is able to support some non-structural activities. So do technical assistance and do flood risk studies and workshops, education outreach to talk about flood risk. And we are also able to look at some of the construction projects and the design projects that Brian had mentioned. So these programs are through our planning studies, and those are, most of them are cost share. A couple of them are, I think the tribal ones are fully federal, but there's usually like a 50-50 cost share that varies with the construction. But in that one, we can look at stream bank restoration to ecosystem restoration to general flood risk, like looking at channel modifications and levees and flood walls and some of that kind of stuff. So as you work with communities and there's either this outstanding question of we need to like reassess what our flood risk is, the Corps has programs that can help with that. And if an exact like desire and product is needed, such as channel modification, the Corps can help with that too. So there's definitely some great programs that we can do. So if anyone has more specific questions, I know Jeff can talk to them a lot more eloquently on the planning side, but go ahead and reach out to myself, Laurel, or Jeff, or go through Tracy and she can reach out to us too. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining in, Laurel. I wasn't watching the chat very well in the beginning and I completely missed that. Yeah, Jeff and Tracy both told me Jeff had to hop off at 11 and I didn't see that until it was a little too late. So thanks both Tracy and Laurel for sharing what you could on the Silver Jackets.
And one quick follow-up, Laurel, do you have, or could you put in some links to some of those resources you mentioned? Because I just got on the U.S. Army Corps site and I'm not a little unfamiliar.
A little overwhelming, I'm sure. Yeah, let me dig them out and I can throw them on there.
Okay, thank you.
And Valerie, I think we also have some on our Silver Jackets page on our DNRC floodplain page.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Laurel, I know Wendy Weaver had mentioned that they have a CMZ project. I think you and Jeff are going to reach out to her along the Yellowstone as well. I think that they're maybe, did you guys connect yet, Laurel? Or is that something that we were going to kind of reach out to Wendy on?
We can reach out. I know Jeff is leading that one, but we definitely don't want to duplicate efforts. So the original proposal was a duplication. So we will reach out with Wendy and I think it's Jeanette and we'll get a path forward.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Valerie. And just a reminder, as we're putting all these things in the chat, we will share all of those out with the notes by the end of the week. All right. Anyone else? Agency, I think I could be missing somebody. I think we've heard from all the agency folks at this point. I feel like we could open it up just for general discussion, responses to questions and things that have come up. I know we've had questions about education and outreach efforts, how to talk to people who may not be so excited about the floodplain mapping and CMZ mapping efforts that are happening. People who might not understand the importance of debris in the streams just in our communities. I don't know if anybody wanted to speak to their experiences or lessons learned around that. And also,
I help. I was going to say, Terry, I really help. Hannah and I help arm the communities with some of those concerns landowners have with floodplains and the mapping. But in cases like this, where there's a recent flood, I'm going to bite myself. Generally, as I knock on wood, there isn't as much pushback. So it's going to be in those areas, like as we were doing recovery, helping the communities over in the Upper Yellowstone, we also had a rollout for a different county on the western side of the state. And during that open house, there were landowners that were like, what happened on the Yellowstone is never going to happen here. So your maps are wrong. So I mean, it's that kind of stuff. But we have lots of tools and resources, and right now for the next 5 to 7 years, however long it takes to complete the flood study, Lawson and Stephanie and Courtney and Paige are my new best friends that can bug me for whatever they need. So
Nadine, I would just add to that too, that the public engagement part of this is going to be such a huge deal, right? Because what I've seen through the flooding event over the last year and a half is a lot of people in denial that they're in the floodplain, or then even worse, in the floodway, and they, want their property removed. And I mean, Fishtail Creek is becoming a big deal where people just don't even feel like it should even be in the floodplain. And, it's just going to be such an interesting dynamic to make sure that it's engaged and education is such a big part of that. And yeah.
I got you.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Well,
I would like to echo on that. I'd love to understand. I think I've had conversations with Steve Story on this too. Just some of the history in Livingston around the floodplain and how it has changed. And if it changes back, there could be significant backlash, even though we just went through a flood. And there's going to be a lot of backlash, I think, on any of that, and just trying to understand what the process is in place to do that outreach years in advance of it coming out. So almost to grease the skids is going to be absolutely necessary. And so,
Yeah, and I'll add that we're already doing that now, working with the communities, and we have the project website up and going. So it's just kind of steps as we go through.
yeah, so I guess I'd just love to know what those are, I guess, from living here and also working with it. I'm not even familiar with what those are. So just, yeah, I think there's still disconnect happening. And how can we figure that piece out?
It's a big part, Wendy, of what I was involved in a lot of the mapping that was going on in Livingston at that time too. And as Nadine mentioned, and Stephanie and Lawson, any of the local floodplain administrators will tell you, it's very difficult when they do have these mapping projects going through. A lot of people are very upset about getting mapped into these areas. Even that's why we're very specific, even on the CMZ maps. I know we provide support to local communities, but we get a lot of phone calls in and emails in where people are upset at the local floodplain administrator for administering the program. I mean, it's like any planner too. It's just the backlash is unbelievable. And so they're dealing with that day to day. And when these events happen, the first thing people want to do is they want to get back to normal. A lot of times I know when they had huge erosion issues, when we were talking to people, and I know the floodplain administrators were doing the same thing, we were talking about the cost involved with trying to stabilize their bank. We tried to talk to them about vegetative means, which is outside of our scope, because when we look at floodplain, I mean, we look at bank, restoration, but we're also making sure that it's engineered and appropriately sized. Sometimes that as was alluded to earlier, especially if they're protecting a structure, a lot of times we're talking about materials such as rock and riprap, but we are trying to tell people, look, you're going to see a fluctuation in these streams for years to come. And a lot of them they want to stop that erosion. They want to do whatever they can. And so you're working in this medium on a day-to-day basis. And it is hard. It's hard to get these maps through. It's hard to, at the local level, to even administer these maps or administer within that jurisdictional area. Everybody's trying to do the best they can. So yeah, it's incredible. Even after these events, how people are oblivious. I mean, talk to Roundup and what they went through in that area that was highly impacted. When we were all sitting at home and just thinking we were going to have a little bit of a break, but everybody was so busy because everybody wanted to move out to Montana. Those homes that sat there and all that water nobody ever went into, people were fighting with Roundup and Muscle Shell because they wanted to buy those properties, but they didn't want to adhere to their regulations. And it happens over and over and over again. The house that we show that got burnt in Sanders County, they built 300 feet from the floodplain, erosion. You know, they had a big event in 97 and it took out that home. They had actually burned it before it hit the bridge. We get a call every year because the Sanders County floodplain administrator has somebody calling, asking if they can build on that property and why won't the community let them do what they just want to do. I mean, it's incredible. We film the pictures and it happens all the time.
No, I guess maybe I should be more clear, specific, and what I'm trying to convey is that there are local groups on the ground actively working on this constantly, whether it's through the Upper Yellowstone Watershed Group and the URAC committee, whether it's with Park County Environmental Council doing their flood gap. There's a lot of work going on. We're meeting with the city and county regularly. So we are a voice and an advocate for this. And so being able to connect with those different groups that are doing that on the ground work and they live in the communities, I think would be highly beneficial in rolling that out. So it's just a suggestion in the spirit of communicating and connecting and collaborating maybe differently than we have in the past. I would just encourage you to figure out how that information's conveyed, because Lawson is crazy. He's so big, they're overwhelmed. And so nonprofits step in and help our communities in different ways, and we're an asset in that way. So I'm just, I guess, clarifying that we're here, we're doing a lot of this work around flood resiliency with other local NGOs, and we can be a resource.
It's great. And one of the things I do see is successful in some communities is they do a flood awareness day every year. Some of them do it a little bit differently. Miles City holds it with their community folks plus realtors and insurance agents. They open it up to the public. Flathead used to do a great one with the Conservation District, and they actually would do their morning portion with school kids like in 7th and 8th grade. It was fantastic. And all the agencies would come and have different stations set up to educate about watersheds. It was great. And then in the evening, they would open up to the public. Those events go a long way. And I know, like you mentioned, the floodplain administrators are, they're also doing planning and about 8,000 other things. If the NGOs can help them out with that, that's fantastic, because that gets a lot of outreach out there to folks. I know you guys are already doing some of those events, but if you do like a community-wide one and really promote it, we're trying to do that at the state level with the governor's office. And I think that will go a long way to starting to get more of that word out for education, especially as these mapping projects are getting ready to come up as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And thanks, Wendy, for bringing that, just that value of the local groups who are doing that. And, not just the workshops, but the one-on-one, just being out there in the community and talking to people. And I did want to just, we're getting to the end of time for discussion, but just wanted to open up if Sharon from Carbon CD or Lindsay Clark from the Stillwater, as the sort of the local folks there on the ground. I didn't know if you had anything that you wanted to add. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Greg and Lawson. Appreciate it. But yeah, anybody from?
You still on?
Yep. Mm-hmm. We're still here.
She wants to speak up.
Oh yeah, just if you had any thought, because I know you as the CD, and I think of the Stillwater Valley Watershed Group over in Stillwater County, just being those local people on the ground who are talking about reaching out to people. I didn't know, if you had anything to add.
Not that I can think of right now.
Okay. Great. Thank Lindsay. I didn't mean to put either of you on the spot. I just thought, I know Wendy spoke up, and then we were like, yes, this is what local groups are doing.
No, I think it's a great point. Especially we built some really great relationship with local landowners through our other programs. And I think we built trust in our group and what we're trying to do. So I think that would help in the long run, more than some agencies that maybe don't have those relationships that are built up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thanks. And that's part of it, again, just to it's sort of interesting that MWCC has stepped into this space, because we really stepped in at first on behalf of like watershed groups and conservation districts to say, hey, what do you all need? And I'd never actually spoken to anyone from DES or the Army Corps before, because that's not usually my realm. But I do think making those local connections is really crucial in this and many other situations. So yeah, thank you. Thank you to everyone. I mean, I just hearing all the, what everyone is saying about, lack of resources and capacity, and everyone's just, doing the best we can. And there are things that are still not going well, and we all know that. And I also want to thank everybody who's on this call for stepping up and doing everything that you can in this area. And in most cases, going above and beyond on all of these things. And so just as we're getting into the wrap up part here, there may still be a few questions that come up, but I just want to check in. This is the third meeting that we've held, right? We've been doing these every 6 months since October of 2022. Do folks, maybe a thumbs up or maybe do you all still think these meetings are valuable? Do you want to hold another one in April or May and continue having these conversations? Maybe I just realized I'm not even looking at my videos to see if people are giving us thumbs up or emojis or, but yeah, and then we do have almost 15 minutes here. So if anybody wants to speak up as well, just what are the value of these going forward?
This is Sage Joyce. I'd recommend, if we're going to do one next spring, that we hit it a little bit earlier. So if there are things that have come out that we can, share those or, get the info out to everyone, the communities and other agencies well before flooding comes, potentially in May, June.
Yeah, good point.
So maybe a March or late February.
Any thoughts from anybody else on that? Okay. Also, one of the things, it was interesting in my thinking, last time in April, we had a presentation from Eric Larson on flood, like on snowpack and how things were looking. And April was a little early for that. So May would be obviously February and March would be way too early for that, but it depends what you're, if we're looking at, sharing out more information before flood season, that would make more sense. If you want a snowpack report, obviously May is a better time. But in terms of the direction of this group and sharing resources and talking about developing task forces or some kind of guidebook, maybe late February, early March could be a better time.
Harry, I have really enjoyed being part of this meeting. I know that I'm less familiar with the Yellowstone in general, but I've learned a ton just from these short couple of hours, and a lot of these themes I think can be applied to the rest of the state. So I'm really happy I'm here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And Valerie, that actually brought up something I was wanting to ask too, is again, the purpose of these meetings is for you all to be able to share information and share resources, share what's going well, what's not going well. But I found myself thinking a lot today, should we invite non-Yellowstone people to just sit in, like to not talk, to not share, but to just listen to these? Because I think a lot of, the things are like, we need to be communicating better and set up this task force. It's like, well, everyone should be doing that. I think it was Tracy who was talking about, or somebody was talking about being at a meeting and people, Nadine, and like, this is never going to happen here. Like, well, probably going to happen everywhere at some point. And so, is there value in bringing other people in to listen? Obviously we can just share resources, but was curious what people thought about allowing non-Yellowstone people to just sit in maybe and listen on these meetings.
I do think that'd be helpful.
Yeah.
I'd like that.
Yeah. says the other
will
water
say
plan.
I think the Big Hole Watershed Group used to do a really good job when they were trying to do the CMZ maps, and they were actually advocating for floodplain maps along the Big Hole. They did that for years. They're a really good resource to tap into too. They used to hold a lot of like in-person functions as well, to kind of discuss like what can we do? How can we move forward? That's how when Stephanie was asking about the regulatory, that's actually the reason why we actually did a legal workshop when we brought an expert in to kind of help navigate these discussions, because there was a lot of concern about the development along the Big Hole. And so I think they're a good one too, maybe to reach out. They might have some additional insight for everyone.
Okay, great. Do you think that, because that my next question was going to be what presentations or what information specifically do people want to hear about next time? Is that something that would be useful to reach out to the Big Hole about that process they went through and actually talk to this group? Or was that something you're saying more like I could just talk to them? But it could be a good presentation for this group.
Yeah. If you guys want to reach out to someone, I would volunteer, but it would probably take me weeks to get to.
No, I can reach out to folks for sure.
But there's
I can help with that too, since they're in my basin.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
But there's also some things in play too, like the local emergency planning committee. I know, Nadine, I'm missing a ton of them, but even like that coordination, there's some things that are in place for best practices for local communities. And Nadine and Hannah, I know you guys knew a few other ones that might be helpful to kind of address what David was talking about as well, as far as that coordination.
Yeah, I was thinking like long-term recovery type efforts. So my background's emergency management. So there's an emergency support function.
Can I ask the question?
Yeah, so Nate, I like where this is going. I think we're all kind of saying the same thing, and I'm trying to figure out what what coordinating agency would be the best one to be the lead on pulling together some of this task force work, right? Like if we're going to walk away with takeaways and trying to build a framework where we actually have action items to put some of this into play, who's championing, who's going to champion this effort, and I don't, because it doesn't feel like it's a local community that would do that. It needs to be bigger with more power behind it.
Yeah, and so my thought is that within the emergency management structure, there's an emergency support framework, right? One of those tasks is long-term recovery. So within that long-term recovery, that task force, in my mind, is something that could fall under. And since the state emergency management agency also coordinates efforts like that, that would make the most sense.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's because Charlie logged off and so he gets appointed to stuff when he's not on.
Oh, did he log off?
Yeah,
we sat and talked about that for a couple of minutes while we were on mute listening to everybody else. And so to me, that's what makes sense is the first word in their agency name is disaster, right? So, and emergency services. So it does make sense. And I know that in any other state where I have ever worked, the DES or the equivalent, the emergency management agency for the state, bore that responsibility as the coordinating office. Now, it was certainly a unified effort, but the coordinating piece, it sat with that agency. And I think, for us to get a better handle on how to move forward and start and all of these things, I think it makes sense to maybe have better conversations with state DES and see what that looks like for them, because certainly we're going to have other flooding. I'm waiting, June is our month in Stillwater. So, right. So we had a flood this year, a train derailment this year, the flood last year. So I'm just waiting for what happens in June. So it would be nice if we had some of these things in place. Right. And I think that's easy sometimes to just start fleshing out what that framework looks like. I think would be helpful to start with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like what I'm hearing is that well, that we need to tell Charlie Gorman he's been nominated to coordinate this task force, that it might be better to meet in late February or early March to start talking about these things ahead of the next flood season. And that it also could be helpful to have a presentation from the Big Hole, from somebody in the Big Hole about their flood, like a little separate, but have a how they were able to reach out to people and get more community input and hopefully get a little more education outreach. Oh, and I'm seeing from Laurel that Silver Jackets can support communities with EAPs, and okay. Yeah, and so then I guess maybe my final question is what is going to happen in this next meeting, and then what needs to happen out in communities. Oh, Jeff just hopped in belatedly. Like again. Anyway, we do need to wrap up here, but I'm going to put all these things up for next time. And I guess I will, I'll probably send out a doodle poll, so we can pick a date in late February or early March. And when we send out the agenda, the notes and all of those resources, maybe I'll put that out, those questions again of like, are these the things we want to be talking about? And what are the next steps? Yeah, did anybody have, I know Valerie, didn't know if you had any other wrap up things or sort of overarching things.
Yeah, I mean, I do, but I didn't want to take away time from this discussion because I felt like it was really valuable. I guess I took a lot away from this, and I love that we're shifting more towards preparing for the next one as we do these recovery efforts. And yeah, so like the playbook, the task force, and high level resources and ideas, like building the relationships in advance so you're not building them during the emergency. And then yeah, I smile and shake my head at the education and outreach. I feel like our work is never done in anything that we do. This is always a high priority. So it sounds like things like permitting and the floodplain versus the CMZ maps, and then also the ongoing work and educating the public about river ecology and hydrology is super important.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Valerie. And yeah, I think we could probably just end 2 minutes early. I don't think we have any, there's lots more we could talk about, but look for that email in your inboxes later in the week. All right. Thank you, everyone.